This sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension for lunch, we were debating the Appropriation Bill 2026. We returned to the Appropriation Bill 2026. Before we commence, I just want to, for public edification and clarification, you might be seeing Minister, the Honourable, the Minister for Foreign Affairs is inside this hallowed chambers. Just for public notice that there was a constitutional amendment bill that became law on the 18th of December 2025, which gives the right of a minister to speak in any place, so that he's authorized, therefore, to speak in this chamber. Right. Right. We revert to standing Finance Committee.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
This Honourable House is now in Standing Finance Committee.
Head 32, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, in the amount of $80,691,724.
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move permission for myself and my staff to join the estimates in the well of the House.
Permission so granted, Minister. Pedro. Listing the officer listing. Good afternoon, honorable members of the House. Good afternoon to our esteemed guests or public servants. Let me briefly go through the rules that will govern this debate this section of this debate. Honourable Minister, you would have 10 minutes to give an overview of your ministry. Honourable members will have the opportunity to ask a question and then, if necessary, 3 follow-up questions. Questions based on what the first follow-up questions being based on what the first question was. Asking public servants that before you begin to speak, that you would give your name and your position within the ministry. Honourable members, I will recognize those persons who indicate by the lifting or the standing of your name tag, so to speak, for lack of a better word. I will recognize you in the order in which you catch the eye according to the terms of this Honourable House. Honourable Minister, you may proceed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and let me say it is an honor to be here to engage this House on the contribution of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade to the government's estimates for 2026-2027 financial year. We are experiencing a structural transition in global affairs. The international order is evolving, and I say that with some caution. It may even be descending into a place that we may not even recognize. But at least we know it is marked by geopolitical fragmentation, supply chain realignment, technological disruption, security-driven trade policy, and the tightening of immigration and migration regimes. These are shifts that are not transient. They define the operating environment in which Barbados must secure its future. The question to be answered is, how does Barbados convert diplomatic capital into measurable economic and developmental returns in an era of geopolitical volatility and fiscal constraint? Our response must neither be reactive nor ideological. It must be strategic. Historians, philosophers, and political scientists alike go to great lengths to determine the zeitgeist. That is the defining spirit of a particular era. What is happening? What guides policy? And it is now clear in this current environment that we are living in that it is one marked by profound instability, uncertainty, and existential threats and dangers. And it is equally clear that the most obvious manifestation of this is in the international arena. Hence, Barbados' foreign policy and its operations of this ministry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, must assume a place of centrality and priority in all the governance arrangements of this country. Furthermore, it is in troubling times like these that it behoves us to go back, we believe, to our basic principles, our basic foundational principles of our foreign policy, and indeed also our domestic policy, to root and orient ourselves. These foundational policies are to be found, as we know, in the inaugural address made to the United Nations General Assembly by the Right Excellent Errol Wharton Barrow, National Hero of Barbados, back then Prime Minister Errol Barrow, in December 1966 on the occasion of Barbados' admission to the United Nations. And in that seminal address, Prime Minister Barrow enunciated as follows, and I quote, "In thus charting our domestic course, we can have no interest in a foreign policy which contradicts national goals. On the contrary, we will support genuine efforts at world peace because our society is stable. We will strenuously assist uprooting the vestigial imperialism because our institutions are free. We will press the rapid economic growth of all underdeveloped countries because we are busily engaging in building our own. In fine, our foreign and domestic policies are the obverse and the reverse sides of the same coin. We have devised the kind of foreign policy which is consistent with our national situation, and which is also based on the current realities of international politics. Those were said in unquote. That was said in 1966. It could really be relevant for today's world. Mr. Chairman, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade thus is recalibrating Barbados' foreign policy and foreign trade policy to meet the global realities, while remaining firmly grounded in our enduring principles for respect of international law, commitment to multilateralism, defense of small developing island states, climate justice advocacy, adherence to rules-based orders. Recalibration, however, does not mean abandonment. It means that we execute with discipline. And at the heart of our foreign policy remains the goals and aspirations of all our citizens. Further, it is sanguine in these challenging times for regional solidarity. This is not an option. It is foundational. Our engagement with CARICOM remains at the center of our diplomacy and must always remain. Functional cooperation, trade integration, collective negotiating and coordinated external engagement, that is our foreign policy, amplifies Barbados' voice and bargaining power in the world. Even as we diversify globally, even as we understand national priorities, CARICOM must be the anchor, a strategic anchor of our foreign policy. Simultaneously, we will continue to work within and strengthen regional and hemispheric organizations such as the Association of Caribbean States and the Organization of American States, OAS. Barbados has long embraced and has aggressively moved to redefine engagements and partnerships with the Global South. It has happened now at a speed with which we should be proud and which the world is actually watching. And much of that has been due, in part, significantly, to the work of our Honourable Prime Minister in the global sphere. We are building alliances now all over the world as we diversify our efforts to build relationships and partnerships that redound to the benefit, not just in the stratosphere of foreign affairs, but to the average citizen in Barbados. Our estimates, therefore, reflect a deliberate revisioning of our strategic relationships with long-standing partners. We will continue to do so. The United Kingdom, the European Union, Canada, the United States. We know who they are. With the United Kingdom and the European Union, we are moving beyond historic frameworks into actually mutually beneficial economic engagements, focused on services trade, sustainable finance, regulatory alignment, development cooperation, and investment facilitation. Our engagement with the EU institutions in Brussels and in the WTO in Geneva is being sharpened specifically to give us the advantage to take the opportunities as they present themselves. The global posture of Canada, of course, is evolving under a new Prime Minister, Mark Carney. And Barbados is paying close attention because it is here with our long-standing relationship with Canada that we aim to forge new pathways to progress, to cooperation, and for investment. Indeed, as we speak, Canada has reached out to Barbados to engage negotiations for a new cooperation and development agreement. And we intend to look at that expeditiously. Skills recognition, mobility frameworks, trade, growth, managing migration, and of course the asylum dynamics. We will seek to move from merely negotiating air services agreements, for example, aggressively move to ensuring that we have connections and that we get planes in the air flying, coming to Barbados and out to Africa, the African continent, building again on that relationship which Prime Minister Motley has been able to establish so excellently with our friends in the African continent. The recalibration, perforce, requires indeed structural over-dependence on the North Atlantic partnerships. Whilst we will continue to build with those, once we are organized and we know exactly where we are, we also know that we cannot continue to rely on the North exclusively. We must diversify our relationships, Mr. Chairman. Because as we can see, the volatility, the uncertainty, the capriciousness is a dangerous space to operate in without firm foundations. And so as we have in the cog of the wheel, CARICOM, our national interests, CARICOM, and then our traditional partners on the outer layer, we are going to build spokes of partnerships and relationships to deepen what we are doing. We are therefore modernizing our diplomatic toolkit. We have to change policy, but we have to maintain first principles. We can no longer approach the world as we approached them before. It is changing, and we too must change, not reactively, but proactively. Building new data-driven trade analysis, digital diplomacy platforms, market intelligence systems, diaspora engagement matrix, and a predictive risk monitoring. Not waiting for things to happen, but moving proactively to ensure that when we get reliable intelligence as we do, that we begin to recalibrate and move accordingly. Export promotion, labor mobility negotiations, and reputational management. These will be the new bases for us moving forward. Internally, the ministry is investing in its professionalism and in modernization of the ministry, and we intend to work, of course, with our Ministry of Industry and Information to ensure that we modernize all of our systems and have real data available to us, or I should say, expansive data available to us real time, that we can make comprehensive decisions rather than having to be delayed by paper, by processes, by procedures, which even though we will do those, will have to be expedited. I want to make a final point here, Mr. Chairman, and that is this.
Honourable Minister.
That
Honourable Minister, indeed, the final point.
yes, final point. I want to make the final point here, and it is that for many years, both in a previous life and now, we have heard about the issue of Team Barbados. And it has worked sporadically in some environments and in some respects. But one of the critical and main things that we want to bring now is to ensure that we institutionalize that relationship. When we say Team Barbados, all those ministries and departments that impinge on Barbados's external relations, whether it is in tourism, international business and transport, international transport, commerce, trade, agriculture, we want to build a concerted institutional team under the chairmanship of the Prime Minister to be able to ensure that that becomes not an ad hoc convenience, but an institutional reality. And it is to this, Mr. Chairman, that all that I have just said and all that you will hear today is going to be channeled through for us to achieve the objectives set out in this ministry document under our various briefs. As you said, my team is here, and as we introduce them to speak, they will, of course, identify themselves and the departments they represent. I am obliged to you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that headstand part.
Thank you. Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And this question, first question, I have three questions for Senior Minister. The first question, of course, I heard you say the world is watching. The world is watching the hostilities in the Middle East more than anything else right now. And of course, I would imagine that your team would have put together or have a working group to be able to mitigate any expected negatives or unforeseen negatives that would happen because of those hostilities. Now, I wouldn't imagine that you would have that in your estimates, because these estimates have been prepared before. But having said that, what strategy do you have that you may want to share with the people of Barbados? What strategy do you have to mitigate any negatives that you anticipate would be seen from the hostilities going on in the Middle East that the world is watching this time? Clearly, the first thing people would think about is the cost of energy. But of course, there are others. There are logistics matters, there's supply chain, all sorts of other things. And I'm asking, what strategy do you have in place, or what strategy does your ministry have in place to mitigate those negatives that you would anticipate out of the hostilities? We don't know how long they will go on for, but we must anticipate everything and have a plan A, B, and C for it. So that's the first question.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. You are absolutely correct. Truth is, our very first stop at the station, our very first priority in this entire exercise, as it unfolds, with the high degree of uncertainty that abounds to it, is to ensure that our staff at the mission in the United Arab Emirates, headed by our Ambassador, Her Excellency Anna Libab, and also members of the staff, but equally as well, the wider Barbadian population who are either visiting or resident across the Middle East, are actually safe, are sheltering in place, and are in connection with us. If you would note, the GIS has put out a notice from the ministry, a statement both on the conflict, but also in a consular way to those individuals, and that is our first priority, to ensure the safety of personnel, Barbadians over there, and of course, assets. Now, as this unfolds, we have to see how things go, how long this goes will determine on whether we enter into negotiations once the airspace is open for those who want to be repatriated back to Barbados. My understanding is that there's some movement there. We cannot speak to it now because it still is in its very embryonic stages, but we are working on that specifically. To the broader issue of the impacts now of it, of course, as you said, there are some potentially significant impacts. Our remit really is to gather the necessary intelligence as to what is happening, how it is happening, and when it is likely to begin to seep through to Barbados and, of course, the rest of the Caribbean. In doing so, then, we will build strategic relationships, as I said, on the Team Barbados with the specific ministries here at home domestically to begin to analyze how we respond, how we advise the cabinet and the government to respond to those issues. The early issues are, of course, in energy. We can see that there's movement in the price of oil. I believe the Honourable Senior Minister responsible for energy did speak to this publicly. We know that there are supply chain issues because a significant part of the cargo on commodities and other supplies comes through the Strait of Hormuz. So we know that there will be effects of that coming down. We do not know how significant those will be, but we are beginning to have those conversations. Both papers and other instruments are being prepared to be shared once approved by Cabinet, of course, with the wider government, and then, of course, for those parts which can be notified to the public. We will also be engaging through, again, the Team Barbados and under the chairmanship of the Senior Minister to engage the private sector and other trade unions and others in the society, the wider society, to alert them as to the challenges which may occur and how we can mitigate those. Of course, central to a lot of that, if it becomes as difficult as we could anticipate it would be with a prolongation of the conflict, is of course the Ministry of Finance and how the government then, the administration then responds to assisting Barbadians. But for the moment, monitoring, intelligence gathering, consultation, and of course, a drafting of a first, medium, and a longer term reaction depending on how the conflict unfolds.
Thank you, Senior Minister. My second question has to again go with the point that you talked about, diversify relationships that you mentioned in your preamble. And I'm well aware that
Honourable member, before we proceed, is this a follow-up question? Is one question and then a follow-up question, not a second question?
Okay.
You do the follow-up question,
diversify
and then you
relationships.
can come back later and ask
the
the
other
second question.
Okay. So diversify relationships, you mentioned. and you spoke about your embassy in Dubai and Her Excellency Anne Bab, and I'm happy to hear that she's safe. However, I know that you've also diversified in other locations as well, and I was wondering what benefits have you seen from those other locations? I know you've diversified in Africa, Ghana, and Kenya, Panama, and so on. What benefits have you seen from having this large diversification of embassies throughout the world?
Our embassy in the Gulf state is actually in Abu Dhabi. So just as a point of correction, I'm there. But thank you for the question, because I think that's a very important question, which I should perhaps properly defer to the Director General to address those issues. But I think in the diversification strategy which the administration has undertaken, the thing that we are trying to do here is not to show how well we can do diplomacy. I think Barbados over the years has shown that we are good at political diplomacy. I think what we want to do, though, is to create strategic relationships for investment, to attract investment, to open up markets. And we are beginning to see those negotiations happen in the area, for example, of the tourism trade, through the negotiation of air services agreements to get flights in and out of Barbados to bring tourists, not just tourists, but also investors who will bring, of course, value, economic value to the country. The second thing also, on the political end, is to build nodes of collaboration to consolidate our position in strategic areas. And we've been seeing that happening in the area, for example, of climate justice, in the area of resilience building, in the area that's been led by the Prime Minister relative to allowing small and vulnerable states to be able to be treated with differential treatment in trade negotiations, in accessing the international financial system. In fact, the entire architecture we have been doing through Bridgetown Initiative. Many of those countries have endorsed Bridgetown Initiative, and we have seen movements. For example, pause clauses, as we call them, or disaster clauses. Barbados now is the largest issuer of debt with disaster clauses. Many countries did not have them before we acted. A few did. But now a significant number are on board because of that leadership. So we are not only seeking to get, we are leading from the front. But I will defer to someone who was here a little longer than me on these issues, and I call on Director General Ford to add her piece.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Chairman, I am Donna Ford, and I am the Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. If I may, I think that the Minister covered generally the bases of the outcomes which have been seen from our embassies which have been established in Africa in particular. But I think that it's helpful to point out that the establishment of the Ghana embassy has helped to position Barbados within that area where we had not been present before. Traditionally, Barbados's engagement with Africa tended to take place at the United Nations or through our mission in Havana, where most of the countries of the South tend to have embassies. But Barbados's presence within Africa gives us a strategic visibility and an influence which we are now in a position to capitalize on by being firmly implanted in both the jurisdiction in West Africa and also through Kenya in East Africa, where the embassy in East Africa also serves as Barbados's representation to the United Nations established there. Currently, we would also have seen from the news recently the number of cultural activities which have actually taken place in Barbados, which have resulted from the type of collaborations which have taken place through our embassies and the type of engagements that we have been having there. Recently, Barbados hosted a major activity in partnership with the Ministry of Tourism, and which saw several African dignitaries come to Barbados. And we have also seen one of the direct results of that type of collaboration is the Afro-Exim Bank, through which Barbados has also been able to negotiate a number of economic agreements. So certainly the strategic visibility and the strengthening of Barbados' leadership among small island developing states with a presence in Ghana has been a tangible benefit. Thank you.
Yes, and I might also add, Honourable Member, the issue of skills. As you know, Barbados does have a shortage of some particular strategic skills in nursing and so forth. And we have been able to tap into those relationships to ensure that we can, have access to those skills. Many of them, particularly in nursing, have been already in Barbados, and we continue to do so as well.
And my follow-up question, and actually will be my final one as well. And I did clearly hear you say that one of the remits of your embassies is to look for trade and to develop, apart from skills, trade relationships and so on. But I looked through your estimates and I have not seen any suggestion that you would have embassy in one of the most highly populated areas of our region, Dominican Republic. And I often ask why have we had in Panama, why have we had in Guyana, why have we got in Kenya, why have we got in Cuba? And yet still one of the most highly populated countries in very close proximity to us with opportunities for trade and investment, and we do not have an embassy in the Dominican Republic. So do you have plans to have an embassy in the Dominican Republic, and if not, why not?
Director of Foreign Trade answered that one, and particularly also on the trade side, the Director for Foreign Trade, because I know from my own experience elsewhere, that Barbados has been in negotiations for a partial scope agreement with the Dominican Republic on the trade side, but I will let them address that particular issue.
That's Paula. Donna Ford. Minister Duguid, I'm sorry, Honourable Member, I really cannot say specifically why Barbados has never established an embassy in the Dominican Republic. But I can say that not having had an embassy there has in any way diminished from the type of relationship and the opportunities presented from the Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic is accredited to Barbados through its embassy in Port of Spain. And Dominican Republic is also a member of the CARIFORUM, which is the group of Caribbean countries, CARICOM countries, Dominican Republic and Cuba. And it is within that framework that we have engaged directly Dominican Republic. And that is not to say that maybe in the future, and now that you have raised this question, this gives us an opportunity to study in more detail the feasibility of establishing there. But our engagement with Dominican Republic has not in any way been adversely affected by not having a physical presence there. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman, Paula Bayer, Director of Foreign Trade. Barbados is party to a CARICOM DR free trade agreement, which is in place, and Barbados trades freely with DR on a number of commodities. It's a wide, comprehensive agreement, and Barbados is in the process of building out that relationship. We meet regularly with the representatives of the embassy in Trinidad, and we're looking forward to further engagements in the future. So there is trade taking place, there is activity between the two sides. And we participate obviously also in CARIFORUM, where we engage as one single unit as we interface with the EU and the UK in the CARIFORUM grouping within the OACPS as well. DR and CARICOM work together there, and we operate as one unit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so therefore, the message there, honourable members, that even though at this time we cannot with any degree of certainty say if or when we will have a mission in Dominican Republic, the engagement continues. And I believe, of course, you know, governments can negotiate agreements. It's the private sector that trades. And so we will be working with our private sector partners to ensure that they take opportunities of these agreements. And there are opportunities to be taken, language barriers notwithstanding, something that we really do have to address. But Dominican Republic is close by, and it is a pretty significant market, as you've said, in terms of its population.
And of course, I will end where I started and say with the hostilities in the Middle East, we have to look to improve and enhance our South-South relationships. And if we have an opportunity at a location that is so close, with such large population and lots of opportunities, I'm just surprised to hear that you're now going to investigate when the Dominican Republic has been there for a very, very long time. In fact, I believe it was the first place that was settled in the Caribbean. But I will leave that aside. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Thank you, Chair. Let me first welcome Minister and his team to the well. I have 3 questions, and I know that, Minister, you like to use cricket analogies, and the first question could be a full toss for you, and you can hit it sweetly, truly covers. Minister, the Foreign Ministry, or the ministry that you lead, Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, may be foreign to a lot of Barbadians. A lot of persons really don't understand what your ministry does, the importance of having it, the importance of the ministry to the benefits in their what they call the social spaces. They don't understand why is it that your ministry could be seen as one of the most important ministries for this country. I want you to extrapolate, if you may, elucidate, expose the importance of having a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and to let this country know exactly what you do so that persons in their native spaces could have an appreciation for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Because I know that unless there's an equal gamut of what you do, and in terms of what we do domestically, that we cannot be talking about the sustainable development of livelihoods. And so this question comes from the young entrepreneur in Silver Hill, the car washer in God Hill, the businessman in Warner's Terrace, Vauxhall Gardens. This question is a question that could be exposed by every single man in Barbados. So I give you the opportunity to let us know what our ministry does and the importance of having it as part of our governance framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. That may seem like a simple, but it's a very loaded request. Let me put it this way. When I was a young student of politics with the Honourable Member for St. James Central, we were often taught that there were certain characteristics that define a sovereign country. In addition to being able to select your own administration through whatever means, ours is liberal democratic, we have elections. It's the capacity to determine your tax policy. If you surrender your capacity to determine your tax policy, then you cannot be considered to be sovereign. But latterly, not least, but latterly, is your capacity to determine your foreign policy. That is what gives you the right to stand up in the world and say that you are sovereign. And in that foreign policy, even though that particular department is not located in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is the capacity to defend your borders. It's to defend your borders. That is what gives you the foundational right to declare to the world that you are, in fact, sovereign. And so even though there is a degree of esotericness about foreign policy, and people see it as somewhere where people go travel and do things that they don't understand, and there's cocktails and wine and that kind of thing. And that's That's part of it. I will not essay to say that that doesn't happen. The reality is that foreign policy allows you to build relationships and partnerships that then translate into domestic support throughout your economy. So, for example, on the issue, take for example, we know the issue of climate change, and even that itself sometimes is esoteric for people. But when we have impacts of weather, and people do not appreciate in the global community the fact that we are at the front lines of such debilitating happenings, they often do not make the connection between when our prime minister or foreign ministers or ministers of environment and so forth and economy go to the world and say that we need to be able to have space, fiscal space, room, as the prime minister calls it, elbow room, to do the things that we need to do to build resilience in our country, something which I believe you in your previous capacity understood very well. And when we do this, and we build those partnerships, and we fight those battles, and we get those gains, we are able then to translate that domestically to help the average person, the fisherman, the farmer, the unemployed youth, the business people, the entrepreneurs. Those are the things that happen. I'll give you a classic example. One of the fights in my previous dispensation that I was able to join the Honourable Prime Minister in fighting for is for Barbados to be ungraduated from the World Bank when I was at the World Bank board. That is a fight that we've been fighting for 35 years, I think, almost 30 years at least. And it happened because of a concerted, consistent effort through our foreign policy. And let me state very clearly here that the first diplomat of the country is the Honourable Prime Minister. We, me, Senior Minister of Foreign Affairs, these folks here, we are just envoys. But the first diplomat of the country is the Prime Minister. And she gives a charge. And we were able to work to that. Now, it was done, I believe, in April. I was still at the World Bank board. Would you believe that Beryl happened in May? And because we were ungraduated and put back into the regular borrowing of the IBRD, the World Bank as we call it, Barbados was able to access almost immediately a loan, low-cost concessional loan, to help our fishermen rebuild, to help our business people rebuild, to help rebuild our coast. That is a real and practical example of what foreign policy means to Barbados and to Barbadians. There are many more examples of this. So when we compose our foreign policy, when we speak to Africa, when we speak to Asia, when we do forays, for example, futuristically into India and other parts of Southeast Asia, when we do those things, we are doing them on a daily basis to ensure that we protect the national interests of Barbados. All that you honourable ministers and members of parliament do in your own right, in your ministries, in your departments, on your boards and so forth and so on, the defense, the opportunity, the advantage that we're trying to gain is entirely to lay a groundwork so that your work can have the greatest level of impact. I can think of no better way to put it than to say, as our right excellent national hero El Barra said it in his address, it is the obverse and reverse of the same coin. What you do reinforces what we do. And therefore the two should never be separated. People say foreign policy, esoteric, out there, big words, all of that. But it has a grounding. For us, it has a grounding. There's no separation between the two. And that is why we have worked so hard to be able to do so. And I give, of course, great credence to all the previous foreign ministers, and in particular, the Honourable Member of St. James Central, Senior Minister, then of Foreign Affairs, and of course, Senior Minister Walker previously in their capacities to push this forward along, of course, with the Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you. And later that response, I want to ask another question. How, therefore, do we shape our foreign policy, whether it's refashion it or however, so that we can have trade and economic prosperity in light of all the things you just spoke about, the geopolitics, the climate change, the pandemics, the disasters that we are having, the threats of war, the reality of war, to ensure Barbados' survival? That's the question. How? I said, how we are going to shape now, in light of all these things, our foreign policy, so that we can be able to buffer the effects of these things.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I'll deflect to the director and let her wax eloquent on that. But let me make the point, and I think it was carried in the presentation which I made. We have to be very strategic in what we do. Look, we're now living in a world where we're hearing about the return of the Monroe Doctrine. For those of us who have had the opportunity to study these things and to come into contact with them, even if casually, we can understand the frightening consequences of what we would term power politics, where might is juxtaposed to be right, and where people are saying to you, not just small countries, big ones like Canada and stuff, you do what I say or I will smack you with a tariff, or I will do this, or I will cut you off, or I will end your visas. And when we look at these things, we have to really seriously, we use the big word recalibrate. We got to go back to the drawing board and make sure that we not only continue to engage and negotiate and fight for the rights of our citizens in the global space, but we also have to seriously diversify who we deal with. We cannot, as Barbadians, we say, put all our eggs in one basket, because if that basket drops, they will all break. And so the work that we have been doing in this ministry to make those nodes of connection in the East, in Africa, in the South, in Latin America, and so forth and so on, these are to ensure that we buttress ourselves against the saber rattling that is occurring in the global community. We know, however, from historic example, from study, that each of these are phases. They're phases. We will pass through them. What we have to ensure that when we pass through them, that one, we come out intact, and two, we come out with advantage. And that is what we are doing in this ministry and must continue to do. You know, you asked a question previously, which I don't wish to go back to. But you know, one of the most disconcerting things that can happen to a Barbadian is to travel and lose your passport. You then really get to understand, you know, you really come to a Christian understanding about what foreign affairs and what the things that we do in external affairs and the relationships we build. You know, you can travel, say, to a very distant part of the world and lose your passport. But if we don't have relations, either directly or through others with those, then you are in serious trouble. And that is why we have to build those relationships. But on the economic side, we cannot continue to feast on ourselves and believe that we will achieve the goals which we have set ourselves economically. We have to diversify. We have to find markets. We have to find partners for investment. We have to drive innovation. We have to include and ensure that the monies which we receive, whether it is monies from state bilaterally, whether it is loans borrowed, whether it is from international financial institutions, redound to the benefit of the average citizen. That is the relationship that we are seeking to build. That is the partnerships that we are seeking to build. That is the trust that we are moving towards to achieve our objectives as a nation.
And lastly, based on what you have said earlier, foreign affairs could be seen as a driver of business. What is being done from your ministry's perspective to ensure that you have the diasporic reach
I will defer to DG Ford.
Thank you. If I were to answer as you framed the question earlier, for the understanding of the person in Warner's Terrace or in Kingsland, I would explain to say that Barbados has bilateral relationships. The relationships that we maintain, for example, with Barbados, Cuba, Barbados, Venezuela, and the multilateral relationships with the international organizations. And I can say that with our bilateral relationships, we have been working to strengthen those relationships, taking our domestic priorities into consideration. In terms of the multilateral relationships, the relationships within the United Nations, within the various international organizations of which we are memberships, Barbados recently, for example, joined the International Energy Association, IRENA, and we have been identifying the organizations which represent for us and in which we can address our priority concerns. And we are hoping that with more direct and strengthened engagement in the organizations, including through membership on committees, committees which have influence, and by assuming leadership roles in these organizations, that we can work to try to secure Barbados's direct interests in a way that they can impact the persons in Warner's Terrace and in Kingsland, Christchurch.
Thank you. I was asking more directly to the diasporic community because I believe that from my brief interactions with persons who live far beyond these shores, there is a level of altruism that exists. And I believe that your ministry is ripe to have that reach out to those communities, to be able to give back to this country and help build. And that's where my question was going. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. In respect of the diaspora, we do acknowledge that we have strong diaspora communities, and in some of our locations, I would say in the United Kingdom, in Canada, in the United States, where we have had Barbadians established for a long time, the various missions, the consulates, and in the case of the United Kingdom, the High Commission there, we have been doing what we can to try to reach out and to strengthen the engagements. The gathering was a huge success, and not only for the traditional missions, but for example, our mission in Belgium, in Ireland, took the opportunity of the regathering to try to bring more Barbadians into the fold. When the minister spoke earlier, he spoke about the Committee for External, for the country team. And we will have to be working more strenuously with the country team to try to see how much more that we can do, you know, to strengthen those partnerships with our diaspora community. Our previous minister, who is here, he was very focused on having us develop a diaspora policy. And that is something which remains a priority for us going forward. Thank you.
And I think that's, and if I may add to that, I think that's absolutely critical. The truth is that the diaspora is so diverse, and there are people who want to contribute. We really do have to make it a lot easier for people to contribute. There is a feeling in the diaspora, and having myself lived in the community for the last 4 years, You hear it. You hear people saying, I want to do this for Barbados, but it's so difficult. Even things like making donations to the Queen Hospital and the other institutions, people literally cry. We have to, and I'm going to undertake this with some degree of evangelism. We have to really push this and find a way, because the truth is other countries do it. I mean, if you see how the Jamaicans are able to mobilize, we have to be able to do the same thing and to have those reconnections. Now, we, not presaging what may happen, but it has been a discussion for a very long time now, and it will happen soon, I assume, that there is an immigration bill, an updated immigration bill that is going to be coming here. That in itself is going to be transformative in terms of linking second and third generation Barbadians with Barbados and giving them an opportunity to be able to return. Because the same way we did Welcome Stamp with such wonderful success, we should be able to do something similar with our own diaspora and to have them come and make those contributions, because the skills levels are just phenomenal, the things that Barbadians are doing. Some are even on all kinds of magazines in the top 100 and this and that. We have to be able to tap into those skills and get them in here to help us. I know a lot of it has been happening at the level of the Prime Minister, for example, but it has to be an institutionalized thing right down through the system, ministry by ministry by ministry. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of course, being the connector between them.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Senior Minister and your team. You mentioned in your preamble how Barbados has distinguished itself globally in the area of climate diplomacy. Now, through our Prime Minister, our voice has been at the forefront of discussions on loss and damage, debt reform, climate justice, and the protection of small and developing states under international law. In these estimates, however, I want to examine not only the leadership, but measurable outcomes. So Sub-Program 97, Climate Change, Small and Developing States and Law of the Sea, the budget estimates for 2026 to 2027 have increased by some $1 million. Can the Minister explain or state what specific measurable outcomes or targets will justify this increase? I'm acutely aware that in this sphere, coordination must exist with the Ministry of Finance, and that the gains may not necessarily be diplomatic. Well, they can be diplomatic and strategic rather than financial. But I'm interested to see how these diplomatic engagements can be translated into quantifiable results, whether in the form of climate finance access, debt for climate arrangements, legal protections under the law of the sea. I want to hear some clearly defined milestones that are to be achieved in this fiscal year. That's it.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. As you may be aware, yes, Barbados has, in fact, and you've indicated that, has been leading on this issue of climate and, of course, on the attendant issues of resilience, climate finance, and those things. There is a cross-sectional, a crossing of interests in relation to that, because it's not only in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it comes in other areas as well, through the Ministry of Finance, through the Ministry of Economic Affairs, of course, the Ministry of Environment, where we have been leading on those issues. Our goals, and latterly, you may also know that the Most Honourable and Ambassador Elizabeth Thompson is currently the chapeau to the Prime Minister, who is chair of the V20. That's the vulnerable, the CFA Vulnerable States 20 group. And in that, we have been making significant strides to bring these issues to the fore not only globally, but also organizing among small, vulnerable states to ensure that we have a place at the table to engage with the international financial institutions first, that is in the financial architecture, but also to engage through the United Nations processes to ensure that we are at the table when these issues are being discussed. One of the challenges is that if you are not at the table, very often the food is shared and eaten when before you get there. One of our goals specifically is to ensure that we provide that leadership so that we get at the table to have this discourse with these institutions, with this architecture, to force change. Why do we need change? Because, for example, on the issue of the loss and damage fund, which Ambassador Thompson, quite incidentally, represented Barbados on up until very recently when leadership changed. In fact, Barbados was one of the founding members of the loss and damage thing. When we were there, we have fought for not only the issue of disaster clauses, which we were able to get through in the end, in many different gradations, but we were able to ensure that at least at a minimum level, not satisfactory, I grant you that one, we got recognition for it, two, we got it institutionalized, and three, we got it funded to some extent. Now, that funding did not reach to the level that we want yet, but it is now in the system. That is a real practical benefit of what we wanted to do. The other thing has been to ensure that fiscal space be given to countries when, for example, disasters strike. You know, one of the things that we were often pushed to do is to have what we call catastrophe bonds. And some Caribbean territories, I know at least one, that did a catastrophe bond. And one of the things that we were able to do through our advocacy, and that we are going to continue to do, is to say that even though that is a relatively good instrument, it was not satisfactory for if a disaster struck. Because the payout, which would have come with a catastrophe bond in its traditional sense, was much lower than if you had done what Barbados was pushing for, which is a disaster clause in your thing to ensure that both principal and interest on a far more significant amount of your national debt was paused so that you can have a say to stabilize first and then to recover. We now have that. We are now the largest dispersants of debt with debt clauses, with pause clauses in them. That is a practical example of what we also have been able to benefit for. Why? This creates the fiscal space. We've been pushing for longer term concessional financing, not just in terms of interest rates, because most people look at the interest rate. Yes, the yield curve and all that, those technical terms are important. And we all want to know that we can get a concessional finance of zero interest if we can. That's a grant. But we also know that the tenor is important. And we have been pushing in these institutions under this particular subhead program, as you see here, to ensure that we are able to manifestly get longer tenures. When I saw tenures, what we mean, that when you go for a loan, and you say, I get it at 5%, but it's only 10 years, with a moratorium of 2 years to repay, that's nice and cute. But if you're doing major installations like infrastructure, like airports, like highways, big infrastructure projects, you want 20-year money. You want 25-year money. You want 30-year money. And we've been saying to the world, small countries cannot come into the market at those prices and have a loan that when you look around in 10 years, 10, 15 years, time, it is time to repay the money. We need longer tenor. We need lower interest rates. And we need the hidden costs associated, because a lot of people don't know that there are hidden costs associated with loans. And we have been fighting this back with some degree of success. I can tell you that the International Monetary Fund, for example, charged fees on the back end of the interest rates, which would normally, appertain to loans. And through advocacy from our Prime Minister and from us, in the space, we were able to get them to look at those costs and to reduce them. And Barbados' cost was significantly reduced when the IMF took a decision after many years of fighting, and in particular, in the last 2-3 years, through the US Congress Committee on Commerce, through the World Bank Board, through the IMF Board, through the connections that we've made, we were able to get some of those hidden costs reduced for countries in the space. We were also able to get the IMF to agree to a sustainability fund, of which Barbados was one of the first countries to draw down on that fund. Now, that fund has now been dissipated, but at the time when it was done, it was seen as the right thing to do. We fought for it, it was passed, and Barbados was one of the first countries to access very concessional financing, a groundbreaking thing for the IMF, because the IMF really never used to operate in that kind of climate space. And so you can see the tangible benefits. So we want to continue this. This is just a start. We have our objectives to be able to push for additional benefits, as I said, on the longer term financing. We want to do on the fiscal space to create, but we also want to ensure that we have those institutions understand that their debt sustainability analysis, those things that they determine when they will say whether you are a sound economy or not, we want them to understand that things that they need to include or rather exclude from those things are taken on. For example, when we make debt investments in education, in health, in physical infrastructure, that you just can't take that and say, oh, the country has a big debt and this debt is all that. Look at the benefits 10, 15 years down the road and factor those into your debt sustainability analysis so that the country comes out with a net positive rather than the traditional macroeconomic tools which give you a net negative. So those are the things which we are looking to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest.
Thank you, Chair. Please permit me to say a blessed good afternoon to the Minister and his team. Given the growing instability across the globe, including the war between Russia and Ukraine, and rising tensions in the Middle East, does the ministry which you presently lead believe that the Caribbean community, known as CARICOM, must now be strengthened in a manner similar to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, particularly in the areas of regional security coordination, economic resilience, food security, and energy independence? That's my first question.
Much, Honourable, that actually is a quite good question. It's a very interesting question. You know, for years, we have, and Barbados has really been a veritable leader in this particular respect. As I said in my opening, we really anchor a lot of what we do around our CARICOM engagement, yeah? And the area of national security is one which I would say, I would make bold to say, let me put it this way, it will be extremely difficult as a small, vulnerable country with open borders to be able to guarantee our citizens the first right of any citizen from its government, which is security. I mean, without security, without safety, you know, you really are spinning top in mud, as they would say. We would be unable to do so if we did not pursue collaborations for our security interests as small countries in this region to be able to combat the dangers which we see coalescing in the levels of transnational crime and criminality, the narco trafficking that we are seeing happening in the region. We know that the Caribbean sits as a veritable entry-exit point for a lot of that activity. We know the impact domestically it can have when it spills over, of course. And therefore, we have been in the forefront of ensuring that we have a regional security system, the RSS, to be able to share information, to share technology, to share intelligence, to be able to allow us to create a consolidated footprint among us. Now, we don't call it a NATO in that sense of the term, but we have our own little NATO here in the Eastern Caribbean. In fact, we have been trying to expand that so that we want other countries to come in for an expanded RSS to ensure that we can work together. But even when that does not happen, to have strategic relationships with countries across the Caribbean to ensure that we can protect our borders, we can protect our waters, and we ultimately can protect our people. That is what we have been doing, and Barbados is going to continue to lead that. We, of course, are the base for the RSS, but it goes beyond that. We then also seek beyond this as a region to build, and you know that some years ago, if my memory serves me correctly, security was added as one of the planks in the pseudo cabinet of CARICOM. So that is how serious we are taking this. We have been fighting as a region and as a country on small arms proliferation. We know what is happening here in Barbados, and it's much worse in other countries as well. We've been doing that. We've been trying to create linkages where we can exchange intelligence on what is happening with groups or gangs, as you want to call them, some of which are cross-border. And so as we define out those realities in the domestic space, we hope to be able to build strategic relationships with countries around us and countries further afield to ensure that we are in a position to respond when things happen, but more importantly, to intervene proactively to prevent things from happening before they come to the stage where we have to respond. And that intelligence has been working. You know, I think the height of that example was in the previous World Cup, where we had all of those pieces of legislation and instruments. I believe Impacts is a legacy organization from that intervention, led again by Barbados. So Barbados has really been in the leadership of this. Now we intend to continue to do so because, as I said, the first call on any government, the first right of any citizen is security and safety. And without that, we are really not doing very much else.
Okay, sir. And secondly, in an era of global instability, supply chain disruption, and raising...
Honourable member, is this a follow-up question or is this a second question? It sounds that way to me. One question, 3 follow-up, and then we move on to the next person. That is the process, sir.
Okay, sir, we'll come back.
If it's a follow-up question, you can go ahead. If it's a new question, then we move on to the next person and you get a second bite at the cherry.
It's a follow-up question in relation to the first one. So in an era of global instability, supply chain disruption, and raising freight costs, it is time for the Caribbean community to establish a regional shipping and logistics alliance to reduce our dependence on external freight carriers and protect our economic sovereignty. And why this matters for Barbados as a small island state that rely heavily on imported goods. So like food, fuel, construction materials, and I know construction costs keep going up all the time, and medicine. So what provisions your ministry have in place to really tackle things like this?
I let the director Director of Foreign Trade respond to that. But again, I think it's setting the course for how we deal with these issues. I really do come back to, and you would hear me perhaps ad infinitum on this issue, that this is really a Team Barbados, that is really a Team Barbados issue. Yes, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we will presage to have relations and open up avenues through our trade negotiations and so forth and so on with other countries. But the truth is that the exposition of how we manifest our interventions on those issues come through other ministries, if you understand what I'm saying. The Ministry of Commerce, the Ministry of Industry, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Tourism. These are the ministries that really take lead. What we do is to try to ensure that there has, as our partner ministries, the avenues through which they can successfully press for the types of things which you have identified. And that, I believe, is our remit. Our remit is not to jump in front of them. Our remit is to ensure that they have the runway to be able to take off into the skies and negotiate those types of things which have now, of course, intelligence relative to trade policy is important. And that is why we said we're going to be data-driven. Because one of the things that we like to do in the Caribbean, and you know, perhaps it's a capacity issue, is that we like to make suppositions on things for which we have no data. And unless we can know who, what, when, where, and how in very accurate and precise terms, quantified down to the last number. Unless we can know that, then it is very difficult to craft strategy. And crafting strategy without appropriate data is always a dangerous thing, because you end up like blind elder. And you know, you may hit, but oftentimes you tend to miss. And our goal is not to be a hit and miss administration. We intend to hit and hit and hit, so that we can deliver on behalf of the people of Barbados. DG of Trade.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paula Bayer, Director of Trade. I would just add that the Caribbean community has established subcommittees on transportation in reference to your question on the transportation within the region. And a number of studies have been commissioned by the entities, and Barbados has hosted a number of meetings to facilitate the pursuit of regional transportation opportunities. As you know, that's a private sector venture, and there have been many initiatives to try to enhance the options that are before the community for trade. The community under CSME, we trade with each other free of duty. So the question really is, how can we get more of each other's goods? And at the moment, we're using air cargo, the existing sea trade, and we're encouraging private sector participation through shipping. So that is actively under consideration. Thank you.
And I think I can add to what Ms. Bayer has just said. I mean, she was very, you know, she did not perhaps want to say, but leading on from the work which Senior Minister for St. James Central would have done when he was occupying this post, is that Barbados is currently undergoing a complete trade policy review. Yes, and we are going to be addressing precisely the issues which you have raised in that trade policy review. And I say that because I want to encourage every ministry to participate fulsomely in that trade policy review. And we want the private sector, I know they have been given, some of them have begun to receive their invitations to participate in the consultations, and we are going to be bringing those consultations to the average citizens. You know, we have the Paris Speaks and those types of things, but we are going to find ways in order to connect with ordinary citizens so that they can input into that new trade policy for Barbados. Because, you know, we can negotiate as governments agreements, but it is businesses and people who really trade and do business. And that is what we want to hear. Those are the people we want to hear from, because they must inform how we move forward in terms of our engagements. So, so thank you very much for those questions.
So, Minister, you had mentioned earlier about paving the way for the importation of goods. So I am hoping that within this year that I will be able to import from Beijing to Barbados without having to go to any other port. Thank you.
Well, we're all wishing for, you know, and that is why, in some ways, what we're doing is so important, because we're diversifying our partners. We don't want to substitute one set of concentrated dependencies for another. And, you know, whilst we diversify out of our traditional partners in the north, we don't want to become baby reliant on any partners in the east. We want to have all those partners, and we want to be able to weigh our options from where we can get the best products at the highest quality at the best prices. And that is very, very important for the average citizen, because supply chain issues are there. We know that. We experience it in COVID. Yeah? Right down to production for us is a difficulty. Because if the inputs, largely 90% of which are imported, and you can't import them, you can't produce. So we have to find ways to ensure, not only domestically that we can rely more on ourselves, but diversify those markets and those sources, and encourage our business people to do as much, because that's very, very important. We speak about cost of living. A lot of our inflation is imported, but there are places in the world that are doing things, producing food, producing items that we need in Barbados that can be sourced at cheaper prices. And whilst it is convenient to do perhaps the obvious thing and go where you are familiar with and where you like and who you know and all those kinds of things, that can come back to bite you. And so we don't want to find ourselves in that position. And that's why we're opening up negotiations with different countries, creating pathways, new trade lines, new air services agreements, trying to get airlift, that is why we're diversifying all of that. Because if you manage the risk through diversifying it, at least you're able to make it through when difficulties occur, but more proactively, you can take advantage of the opportunities that exist. And that's where we are at right now.
Okay, sir, thank you.
Honourable Member for St. John.
Thank you, Chair. I have one question for the Minister and his team. Some time ago, I had asked a previous PS to send some correspondence to ministries in relation to what was happening in sports. My question is, I have young athletes, teams, clubs, national teams that are traveling. Is it possible that you can identify either a desk or an officer from within the ministry to deal with some of the issues that would come up from time to time when our athletes and teams are traveling, because it is a major, major problem. Even in relation to having, I can't remember the type of visa from the US Embassy, but then sometimes they're stuck in different countries and it is a struggle to find someone in this ministry to assist. So I'm just asking, my question is, can somebody be identified from within the ministry to be that point person for the Minister of Sports, the Ministry of Sports?
DG answer.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that question. And I will tell you, yes, a lot of those issues are dealt with through the consular division, but also through the geographical desk. So once we know and once we can establish communication whenever there's a team traveling, and you can let us know, I will take responsibility for that. And I can work with the desk officer responsible for the area to which they'll be traveling and with the embassy in that particular jurisdiction so that we can provide the best facilitation possible. But it's important for us to have the information. Sometimes we are only aware that a delegation is traveling when they have a problem. So once we know beforehand, we will do the best that we can to smooth things and to ensure that things can go as smoothly as possible. Normally, whether it's the Commonwealth Games, the Eucharistic Games, whatever sports event you're going to, normally they have liaison teams in place. So once you let us know, we will definitely do the best that we can, once we have the information beforehand.
All right, thank you. I will have my PS send you some correspondence, but it is absolutely critical. I mean, we have indicated to all of the national federations to do exactly what you're saying, to allow foreign affairs to know when they're traveling. But, you know, for some reason or the other, they either don't do it or they forget to do it. But I will have my PS send you some information so that we can forge that tie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Minister, I agree with you, and I think it is a concept, but I believe given how really volatile things are right now, perhaps we shouldn't leave it to happenstance. A lot of these groups, in order to travel, receive grants from the Ministry of Sports, as they do from the Arts and Sports Fund and elsewhere. Perhaps we should make it mandatory that one of the conditions attached to receiving support should be that you notify the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that a team is traveling and to where, so that we can begin to prepare. And I say that in relation to teams, you know, you raise it in relation to sporting teams, but there are all other types of examples where people are traveling from Barbados, choirs go to sing overseas, you know, delegations go on all kinds of things, and we don't know. For example, right now, I am sure there are people in the Gulf states, in the Middle East, who have traveled there on business or pleasure, and some of us in the ministry, many of us in the ministry, don't actually know. So we now have to put out a notice saying, could you please contact us and let us know that if you are there or not. I think we take these things for granted. Perhaps we could have done that before, but given the current environment, it is very difficult not to. If you do that at your own peril. And I think that we should know, people don't like other people to be in their business. Oh, they want to know that I'm going to Dubai, you know? But you really should, you really should at least notify authorities that you are. Now, sometimes because of relationships we have with other countries, they will tell us. But it is only when trouble strikes. But certainly for sporting teams, such a large group is going, we need to know, because you could end up having a challenge. Look at the West Indies team. We were unfortunately just knocked out of the World Cup, but our people can't get back here because they're stuck in India. They can't travel. So, you know, we now have to look to see, make sure that everything is in place for the Barbadians who are on that team if they're coming back to the region or going elsewhere. So, but we know that ahead of time because they will notify. But I'm saying that it is a good point you've raised, Minister, and one that we are going to ensure that we work with you to find a protocol, find some type of protocol that we can think, particularly for those official visits going, because when you're leaving, a sporting team is going national association, you're already going to represent Barbados. You have on Barbados colors, you're representing the nation. And if you're representing the nation, we need to know, one, that you're going, two, that your arrangements are properly in place, and three, that you're safe. Yeah?
Thank you, Minister. We do insist, if we're funding or part funding, but then you have community teams who do their own fundraising and, you know, they just travel. And sometimes they're stuck. So if we can have that in place, I really appreciate it. I look forward to the partnership. I yield back, Chair.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Minister, Senior Minister and team. And thanks for the conversation so far. I believe this is one of the most important conversations we can have, really, during the course of these estimates because of how the world is now positioned. And my view has always been, Senior Minister, that the budgets really reveal philosophy. When you look at where, especially now in diplomacy, where you choose to spend more, then it tells me that the country is making a choice. And so I was reviewing these estimates and I was asking myself, what is the choice that is being made here? And I saw the two greater increases were in the diaspora unit and in climate. And so for me, what is the question that has been asked and answered in these estimates? Are we suggesting that perhaps Barbados wants to expand its influence, or Barbados is seeking to protect itself as a vulnerable state? Are we seeing ourselves as persons within a geographic space, or are we identifying as a larger global community? There are many questions that came to my mind, but I looked at the estimates and I saw these increases, and I believe that if we turn, PS or Minister, if we turn to the estimates and we look at sub-program 0095, the diaspora unit, this reflects a substantial increase in expenditure. In fact, you've gone from $121,000 or thereabout in your revised estimates 2025 to 2026 to 1.8 million in these estimates. That's an increase of $1.7 million. That is for the diaspora unit. In terms of the climate change, Cities and Law of the Sea section, the sub-program 0097, there has been an increase of about 2-point-something million alone in the operating expenses. And so my question is, what are the specifics really that lead to these increases in both of these areas? Because one would imagine if you're spending more, particularly in diplomacy, that one expects a return on these investments. Are we suggesting a greater, deeper relationship with the diaspora? Are we expecting in our increased expenditure on climate change to find greater grants? How will these things be reported? How will these things be measured? And to what extent, considering that it's so important for the ministry, as reflected in the increase in expenditure, to what extent can the country expect returns from these specific expenditures?
I'll let DG Ford answer that, and then I'll come back in at the end.
Yeah, thank you very much, Minister. Well, Minister, in our exchange earlier, we highlighted the importance of the diaspora and the increasing role that they will have to play to strengthen that true partnership between the diaspora as an extended part of our governance and of our foreign policy, the practice of our foreign policy. Increasingly, we would also have seen with some of the activities in the United States targeting immigrant communities. There's the anticipation that the diaspora will need increased support from the embassies and from Barbados. And we have prepared to anticipate some of that support as well. In our missions also, we are strengthening our engagement with the diaspora and establishing particular units to work in that regard. Because traditionally, the diaspora efforts were contained as part of our own consular services. But very often the consular services remit has not been sufficient to address the kind of approach, heightened approach that we are using to engage the diaspora. So that is only a part of one of the reasons why you have seen the budget increase so significantly. In respect of the climate change, you would have noticed that I can give the example of the change in United States foreign policy, and certainly the way the United States has indicated that has cut their membership of certain international organizations. And there has been, I guess we can describe it as an edict that there are certain areas that will not receive any type of support from the United States within international organizations. And the minister is coming directly from the IDB, but there are words which have been have been struck from their budgets. Words like climate change, diversity. Those are words which those are areas which have not been receiving the type of support traditionally they have been. And Barbados and countries like Barbados are increasingly going to have to work towards strengthening our own defenses from climate change and climate justice, and strengthening and mitigating for climate justice. We spoke earlier also about the role that Barbados plays within the Climate Vulnerable Forum. Barbados is currently the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum for the next year. We've had 2 years, and this is the final of the 2 years. And the budget also covers some of the activities that will be taking place within that particular responsibility as we exercise our Climate Vulnerable Forum responsibilities, including the hosting of a conference here, of a meeting on methane here, a methane abatement here in Barbados, and maybe the Minister of the PS can speak a bit more to that. But that's one of the reasons for the budget, in that as part of our Climate Vulnerable Forum responsibilities, that we will be having to take on a little more expense to execute the responsibilities which accrue to us within that particular remit.
Yes, those are the points that I was going to make at the end, Minister, which I think are, critical, because this entire is no longer a debate about climate. For us, it's not a debate. We're not debating anything any longer. We want action. We are on the front lines of the impact of climate, and for us, this is not a conversation any longer. This is really concrete actions, and we want to be able to pry open doors for better quality financing, to be able to ensure that, one, we can do disaster risk management, and two, that is how we plan for events when they inevitably happen and recover from those, and two, to look at the mode and the speed of recovery that we can have. And that's why you will see that budget increase, and the work we are doing with the V20 is absolutely critical, but not just the V20. There are other modes that we are attacking through the Bridgetown Initiative in the financial institutions themselves, the IDB, the World Bank, to less extent now the IMF, because they've been taken out of the mix by some of our friends. And we want to bring this down now to the granular level, where we can see grants first, concessional loans second, technical assistance, and we've been having these conversations with all the countries. So we're going to be driving that a lot more. We have officers in missions and also at headquarters who are now having this as a speciality to move under the leadership, of course, of Ambassador Thompson and her team to specifically go towards building agreements with institutions and with government to ensure that we can pry that. Second point is, as you may know, Barbados celebrates its 60th anniversary this year and a 5th year of being a republic. We think that is, yes, as an independent country, and also a fifth year anniversary as a republic. We think those are milestones, and we have made provisioning for that across all missions. So you will see a little bump in the expenditure for that. We want to ensure that, not just for people like myself, who are approaching the 60th year, I can't even believe I said it. But we also want for the younger people to understand that this is a journey that has happened, and it has not come lightly. We've had many battles, but we've made it through. And as we set course to go on, then we have to ensure that we continue to put this front and center in the minds of Barbadians, and younger ones in particular, that they understand that there's something that they will have to carry on from us. And so we want to do this not just inside of Barbados, but outside of Barbados. So for the foreign side, we will take care of that. And the domestic side, the other ministries and departments will take place of that. So that's where we are.
Thank you, Minister. Just a quick follow-up, I think, on the diaspora issue. This is so important. I know the Minister, the member for St. Mike for Christchurch West Central have raised it, but this is so critical an issue that I do not know that we can leave this place without giving the public some assurance that there either is or will be a seriously well-constructed investment framework or relationship framework with the diaspora that is different from the way we've constructed it in the past, specifically considering that we've increased our expenditure in this area so significantly. So I just want to be able to say, or allow you to say to the public, that there is or will be something that is well-designed, that we can look at, refer to, that has set its targets, has consideration for measurement in relation to how we engage the diaspora, that reflects the level of investment that we've put into these estimates.
There are a couple of things, and I want you to be able to say that with confidence, because that is one of the strategic goals which we have set ourselves. If you look at the list, a briefing of our objective and strategic goals. But I'll tell you, there's another segment to this that includes actually the Central Bank of Barbados. Yeah, and I know Governor Greenwich, Most Honourable Kevin Greenwich, the Governor of the Central Bank and his team have been going out into the diaspora by invitation, actually, to come and speak to Barbadians living overseas about the many modes that you can invest in Barbados and how much easier it is, including holding foreign exchange accounts, which a lot of people have not or did not know about previously, that you can actually send money home to Barbados in a foreign exchange account, and you can trade in foreign exchange to make investments. You can then transfer that into your domestic account to make domestic investments. But we also need the private sector to come on board with us, because those are the people into which people want to invest. Yes, people will buy bonds, and we encourage them to buy Barbados bonds, BOS bonds, and so forth and so on. And as the domestic market opens back up in a more robust way, as we come out of COVID and so forth, we'll see some of that. But we also know that there are companies in Barbados that are doing well and that are looking to expand and that are looking for capital. And we need to be able to do that, not just through a senior stock exchange or junior stock exchange, if you ever get that, through other instruments as well. And we think that that is important. We're prepared to lead that. We're prepared to be in the process to work with other ministries to do that, but we need the private sector on board with us. And that is why we do state missions. We are going to be insisting that we do state missions, not just diplomatic visits. We've been given an opportunity to potentially go to Ireland, for example, for a major investment conference. And we have said to them that we want the possibility to bring a private sector mission with us, a team with us, to be able to look at investments, because the Irish have been investing considerably in Barbados. But beyond that, you have the whole of Africa, where we are now going into. So as we forte into that, we want now to make that linkage between the diaspora into Barbados or through Barbados into other places in which we have connections in Latin America and in Africa in particular, where we are setting down anchor. And the Afri-Exim Bank is going to be a critical part of that process. One of the reasons why we are so evangelical about them here in Barbados and in the Caribbean is because they can open up doors for us Barbadians, both nationally here in the domestic space, but also globally in the diaspora, to be able to invest outwardly.
Thank you, Minister. I had actually noticed the increase also to Ireland. I think you answered that question very well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. To the Minister and his team, Let me, of course, commend the ministry for the work that they've been doing throughout the last few years. But I wanted to use the occasion to treat to the issue of course, the expansion of our presence around the globe through our missions and our embassies, particularly with respect to a number of strategic cities and countries. And in light of that, many of those cities and countries enjoy a high level of growth. And one of the questions, therefore, I have for the ministry is, what is the strategy, particularly given that it's one of the ministry's key objectives? But with respect to commercial diplomacy, how is the ministry looking to, in this year in particular, be able to attract further investment and at the same time helping businesses in Barbados to tap into the growth in those jurisdictions? Of course, yes, we have a Ministry of Investment, but at the same time, how is the ministry looking to ensure that through commercial diplomacy, that the presence that we have on the ground allows for Barbados to meet a lot of its strategic objectives in this regard?
DG Ford.
Thank you, Minister, for that question. And you ended off by making a key point about the presence on the ground. We have, as we pointed out earlier, we have missions in a number of newer places, having moved away from the traditional partners. And it is true that many of the missions are still small, and that is why we depend so heavily on the partnerships that we enjoy with Invest Barbados and Export Barbados and BTMI. And it is within the framework of those partnerships that we will be pursuing the investment opportunities and the partnerships that we are seeking to realize the strategic objectives set within. And that has been the approach that we've taken in East Africa and in West Africa. The fact is that with persons on the ground, what our colleagues do, they identify the partnerships and they match them with the entity or the agency in Barbados that can develop the relationship and facilitate the type of investment in the niche areas identified. If we can, we understand that we have to operate with limited resources, human and materials, and there are some of our embassies which are still not fully staffed. And so that is why the importance, the country team approach is so important going forward to help us to achieve, in particular, the investment missions through the partnerships that we negotiate and identify.
And I think on top of that, Honourable Member, Minister D, look, I think one of the things that we have, as I said before, one of the things that we've been really good at is the political diplomacy. But Barbados has distinguished itself as really being very sophisticated in doing this. The area of commercial diplomacy, however, I think perhaps there's a politeness that crosses over. And so we have not been as aggressive as a country in going after opportunities for investment. My hope is that we change that we really try to build very strategic relationships on concrete things that can be of benefit to the country. I'll give you one example. One area, for example, is in the area of alternative energy. As you know, for many years, we've been having some challenges with the regulatory issues in relation to the production of alternative energy and storage and dispatching into the grid instability. We've now gotten past that stage. And I believe Senior Minister who's responsible will tell you that there's going to be a level of aggressiveness for people to participate in that exercise. That is an area for which substantial investment can come into Barbados. And we have to now almost, even though we don't like doing some of these, we have to silo some of these things and go after them to ensure that we get not just expansion, but quality. And that we get quality investments in specific areas. I think we've done exceedingly well in the area of tourism, hospitality services. We are seeing an influx of investment internationally into our tourism product and our tourism sector. And that has been great. But what about the creative industries? What about the creative industries? We have many, many, many talented people out here. I don't think, honestly, that we have done enough. In fact, I believe we can do, I think most people will concede that we can do a lot more in connecting those persons who are in our creative industries. And when we say creative industries, people feel that we only mean calypso, or the performing arts. But look at the culinary arts. Could we have things to sell to the rest of the world? One of the things, if you live outside of Barbados for a little bit or travel a lot, one thing people tell you about is how good the Barbados culinary scene is. It is world renowned. Or festival, or rum and food and rum festival. We see those things happening, yeah? And people come to Barbados for that. We have to export that. We are an exporting country. We earn our living by the export of services. We export more services than we export goods. Every time a tourist lands at the airport and we sell them something, that is an export. Our job is to ensure that we can find investments for those, both inward, foreign direct investment, but also external investment, so that we can, as we say, expand beyond what we call gross domestic product to gross national investment, the GNI. That is where I think, Minister, we have to go, and I agree with you. And in these estimates, we have particularly segmented resources. Not enough, but we'll work with what we have until we can get more to ensure that we work with institutions in Barbados, Export Barbados, Invest Barbados, Central Bank, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Energy, to make those contacts to drive specific areas for which we have some competitive and even comparative advantage to get a return on the investment.
Yep, thank you very much, Minister, for that. And I want to commend you and the ministry for that strategic direction. And just as a follow-up then, on the commercial diplomacy front, as you rightly said, there needs to be a level of aggression in that regard. And perhaps, and I'm sure perhaps it's already happening, but for the purposes of the public, just walk us through what are some of the trainings so as to ensure that the diplomatic corps, which goes out on behalf of the country in different jurisdictions around the world, is able to spot the opportunity or opportunities to bring home, as it were, the opportunity for the country. Because of course, if you're trained in traditional diplomacy, but not necessarily having that eye for not just business, but as you rightly said, the creative sector, energy, and many other areas of national importance to Barbados through the lens of commercial diplomacy, oftentimes we may or may not land the plane, as it were. So just walk us through perhaps the training element to be able to spot. In other words, the retooling of the Foreign Service to be able to meet those challenges and opportunities.
DG4.
Thank you very much, Minister. Minister, you have highlighted, and clearly you've studied it, one of the areas which we have also identified internally as a weakness and an area that needs to be developed even more. Traditionally, Barbados, we could have relied on at that time, there existed the BIDC and Invest Barbados. It was BIDC and I don't remember the name slips me right now. But Minister, you've identified one of the areas where we have perceived that we do need to have more training. And that is why, as part of our retooling, we have identified that those are areas where our human resources need to have more heightened skills. And we have included that in our estimates as one of the focal areas for training, so that even as we are doing that, what we do is that we facilitate the kind of partnerships through the agencies which have the expertise in that area. But yes, you are correct. There are areas where we do need, where there are perceived weaknesses, and where we hope that that we will receive the training necessary to be able to do better, to close the deals, as you have pointed out. But I can tell you, though, that in the Foreign Service, we have also tried to attract a wider variety of skills to the Foreign Service. But as the Minister pointed out earlier in his initial remarks, recognizing the core thrusts of the diplomacy, but we also have looked at attracting persons with other skills to the Foreign Service, so that we can have a broader dynamic mix that would help us to achieve the objectives which are there for Barbados in the dynamic and ever-evolving international environment. But yes, one of the areas where we do need to fine-tune and to sharpen our skills is in the area of commercial diplomacy and training our diplomats to be strong commercial diplomats.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
And I think, Minister, one of the things in the process of transformation for the ministry that we specifically have to target in terms of how we do the entire ecosystem of how the ministry operates is to look at some processes, to change processes to make things more efficient, so that decisions can be taken with a little bit more speed and expedition to be able to deliver. Which means looking at all of our internal processes and seeing where bottlenecks and juggernauts exist and transforming those in a way that makes it a lot simpler, clearer, and easier to use. Not just for the internal professionals, but also for those from outside, the people who engage us. The other thing is plant. One of the things that we have to do is to ensure that we have plant that is fit for purpose. Go through, I mean, if we've had, Ministry of Foreign Affairs has owned a lot of property overseas. The truth is, a lot of it is aged property. If you go to it, a lot of it is not in the very best shape. And we've been incrementally trying to change that. But we have to accelerate some of that, because people can't produce their best if they're not in the best environment. And we need to be able to address those issues and ensure that we have plant not only that is safe environmentally and conducive to high levels of production, but also has the modern tools for which people can be able to engage the rest of the world, because other partners are doing that. Speaking of partners, we spoke about that already, the type of partners that we choose. We also have to look at the type of people we retain. Yeah? The traditional diplomat, I'm saying this advisedly because I'm sure the staff has not told me to say this, but may I say that the traditional type of person that we have attracted for the diplomatic service will change once we shift into a different mode, particularly in the commercial diplomacy. We will need more economists in the ministry. We will need more technical management specialists in the ministry. You know, before you used to say, come to Foreign Affairs, you do political science, you have a master's, and maybe if you have a language, Spanish or French, you go to the top of the list. Now, we as ministers operate in the area of policy, but that policy has to, we don't get in personnel matters. But that has to change. The policy about who we hire has to change, because the world is changing. So we have to have people who can adapt, people who can go into the space and immediately be able to engage at all levels. We really do need to have some of that. So the overall policy then has to change. And that's why I said the toolkit and the playbook. Sorry for these little simple terms, but we have to say this for the average citizen. The playbook, the thing that we use as the strategy to ensure that we are able to make impact, and the tools we are using have to change. Because the world is changing right in front of us. We're not going to read it in a book by some anthropologists or political scientists in 10 years' time. The thing is happening before our eyes, on our phones, on our cable TVs, or whatever they watch now, the internet TV and all that kind of thing. It is happening. People tell us in Barbados about things, people in New York and London and elsewhere tell us about things that happen in Barbados. Somebody gets, unfortunately, damaged somewhere, and somebody from overseas send you and tell you, did you hear there was an accident in Colorado Road? Right outside number 1 Colorado Road, which is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, by the way. And you are there saying, really? And you are in the building. You didn't even know anything happened outside. So this is the reality that we're living in. And therefore we have now to match that by working not in siloed ways or with inappropriate human resources. Not that you put people down, but we have to find the appropriate skill sets. So if you're driving business and investment, you can't have a person who does not have an understanding or training in how to attract, how to go after investment, how to understand how markets function and so forth and so on, and you put that person there, you know, you are doing a disservice to the person. Because you're expecting them to deliver something that they have absolutely no understanding about. And then you complain that it is not being done. We can't do that to people. We can't do that to ourselves. We have to begin now to change things to match where we are at. And I'm saying our Prime Minister, for example, has opened up doors for us. There are linkages and contacts that we have now that we did not have 10 years ago. And I can't presage to say that that is going to exist forever. So now that we have an opportunity to do things and to take advantage of those things that have been opening up for us, we have to strike right now. Not next week, not next year, not in 2 years. It has to happen now. And therefore, if we have to come back to the Honourable House, or to the Prime Minister, the Ministry, to say, look, we've done this and we've seen how things have moved, we need to shift this or shift that, then that's what we have to do. Because right now is the time for action, and I think that Barbadians expect this of us, and we are going to be working pinpoint to ensure that we do so. And I can give you the assurance, Minister, that following on from what Senior Minister would have done, Honourable St. James Central, in the work that he would have done specifically, we are going to be picking up that work and pushing that aggressively to ensure that that transformation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade is expedited to its most logical conclusion, to the benefit of Barbados. That is what has to happen. So trust me, the next year, God willing, we are all here, we're going to have a different conversation. We really are going to have a different conversation because we have to drive those things. They're embryonic, yes, they're setting out their green shoots now. It's been a long, arduous task, but we can't drop the ball. And I give you the assurance as Minister that we are not going to drop the ball because we've worked too hard to do these things. We met very recently with an expert advisor for us in the UK, is it? I won't call the name because I don't have permission to call the name. But I mean, if you hear the kinds of things, he's an advisor to the Prime Minister's office. But if you hear the things that he is proposing ought to be done in a space that we already know, the kind of avenues that we can open up, the kind of connections that we can make, I say we have absolutely no excuse. We really do have no excuse. We really have to get it done, or else we fail. And failure is really not an option.
Thank you, thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Michael Central.
Thank you, Chair. On the outset, let me first start by commending the Ministry for all of their hard work in enhancing Barbados's international profile. But what I really want to focus on, and you did, Minister, you did touch on it earlier, in terms of what are the tangible benefits for persons like those found in my community, the small man, the small entrepreneur, the working man, So what I want to focus on is job opportunity. I read about the project, the Early Health City project, so perhaps if you could use this opportunity to tell Barbadians and the people in St. Michael Central what that project will be about, how many jobs, for example, will be created, what percentage will be given to Barbadians, and if there is a procurement protection established to ensure that local contractors would benefit.
DG4?
Thank you very much for that question. Thank you. The Early Health City Initiative, that is an initiative which has emerged through our ambassador to the UAE and some partners that she has identified as part of the efforts to strengthen Barbados's own, I would call it, health diplomacy. And this is a transformational pharmaceutical project which is being executed in partnership with Export Barbados, and to try to capitalize on the, should I use the term brain trust, by the capacity of Barbadians to work in this area, because Barbados does not have large manufacturing spaces. So we have identified smaller niche projects that where we can work with experts to help to, to develop our own, to help to develop, the kind of refined processes in which we could participate. I don't have the technical details because I must confess to you, it's not my area of expertise. But certainly from what I understand of the project, there will be significant spin-off to Barbados and to Barbadians, which could see opportunities for persons in your community, especially for the younger graduates and persons who are interested in STEM, and also, even if not at the graduate level, persons who persons who have like computer skills, that type of thing. So what I can promise to do for you, Honourable Member, I can try to see if I can get the details of the project that we can share with you, and maybe I can organize a conversation or presentation with the group for you and for any other the Honourable Members who might be interested, so that you can have more details on the project. Because certainly it is something which is one of the newer transformative projects which we are looking for. As the previous speaker, the representative for St. James Central, identified that commercial diplomacy is one of the angles which we really have to dig deeper in. And this is one of the types of projects that we're trying to develop in that area. And St. George North, sorry, St. James North, our former ambassadorial colleague, now the representative of St. James North. But this is one of the, certainly one of the transformative types of projects that we are looking to attract more of them to Barbados. And we can certainly work through the minister to organize a presentation for you. Hope that is helpful.
I would very much appreciate that information. Thank you for that. So the next question, which would be a sub question, would be in terms of the internship programs that I see made reference to. I see that there would be some university graduates being taken on. So my question is really to go into details about that a little more. How many students will be taken on yearly? What would they have to do to sign up? What would be some of their the requirements that they would need other than having the university degree in order to qualify? That type of information would be useful.
Are you referring to internships in the ministry or to the particular project?
The one regarding the FSA contracts, and then to build them on then further to become the foreign service officers.
Yeah, I can let PS speak to that, but I could say that I can honestly tell you that the internship program is one of the most exciting areas of the ministry. And we welcome the opportunity every year to bring new graduates in. I can actually tell you that we have officers here on the team who actually were interns in the ministry. I can't see. With one of the officers, Tricia Welch, was my intern, and she's now a senior foreign service officer. She had served as an intern in the ministry and in our mission to the United Nations. So the Foreign Service Associate That's one of the programs that we've identified as a way of retaining interns, because some people have come to serve for a short period, but they may have graduated from school and they may not have a job yet, and they want to stay on at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because when they come into the ministry as interns, we throw them right into the deep end. They're exposed to everything that we do, and once they sign the Secret Act, and we warn them early about, because they're exposed to so much important information, we warn them about what they're not allowed to divulge. And the program, traditionally the interns came only during summer, but now because of the heavy workload, we find that we have been having interns year round. The qualifications, it has been easier to have interns who are at the university level, certainly for the type of work we do, because interns who are not at that level might require more supervision, and the ministry is like a treadmill. There's always work to be done, and we are moving quickly to get things done. So it's better to have people who already have a knowledge of, I would say, at the university level, not necessarily international relations, but exposure to policy, so that it is easier to supervise them and easier to give them projects to be done. How is it done? They can send an application to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to the Deputy Permanent Secretary, who also heads the Human Resource and Administration Department. The address of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is very easy, barbados@foreign.gov.bb, or they can apply to the Permanent Secretary, ps@foreign.gov.bb, or to dg@foreign.gov.bb. And we will get those applications where they're supposed to go. I can tell you that we have as many applications for internships as we have for foreign service officer positions. But we always find the more the merrier, because we enjoy having them at the ministry as much as they enjoy coming. Thank you.
Thank you. That was truly inspirational to hear that you can start off as an intern and then be sitting in the well of Parliament during the estimates. So my final spin-off question from that then would be, what is the small business strategy? So I did read about the implementation of the Samoa agreement. So how does an entrepreneur like the one you would find in St. Michael Central benefit from that type of agreement, or even CARICOM Colombia negotiations, for example? Can you bring it local?
We will invite the FT buyer to answer that one.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the question. Barbados is signatory to a number of agreements, and the EU agreement is a development agreement. It identifies specific areas where support is provided to the business community, to civil society, and partnerships throughout in various areas. We have duty-free access to the European market at present. We've had since, well, we always did, and we have it through the EPA since 2008. So all of our products enter the EU once they meet the criteria, free of duty. If there are any impediments, we also have an avenue to discuss and negotiate those with our counterparts. We have access similarly, obviously through CARICOM, so we can trade with the Caribbean community members. I will add that the relationship with CARICOM goes even deeper, as you're aware, where we can work in CARICOM states. At the moment, we can move freely with 3 other member states. We can trade with all the member states free of duty. Any business person can set up business in any CSME participating state. We can go tomorrow and register your small business in any of the 12 participating states. So that permission, that facility has been in place since 2007. So we are moving ahead in terms of opportunities for business persons, for young people to trade, to provide their services and businesses across borders in various levels of complexity, whether it be a small individual, as small as, baking, sewing, as small as the enterprise may be or a large corporation that is in place in Barbados and across the community. Thank you.
Thank you. So my final question then would be, in terms of the free movement agreement that we just had in October of 2025.
Honourable member, is this another question? You would have had your 3 questions, follow-up
Very well.
questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just on the first question that you asked, because I was searching for it, on the early health city Barbados issue with the UAE, we do have a presentation which we can share. I think DG made that point. It is quite condensed, and we will make assured to make it available to all members of the House. Yeah, because we feel that even though you asked the question, there are some really serious possibilities in there along the lines that you've asked for. So we are going to make that available to all members of the House and arrange for a follow-up presentation after you've had a chance to digest the information. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
Honourable member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The question, and I'm not sure if I should call it spin-off. I'm hearing different terms used, and I'm still not clear even since yesterday. But I'm talking about resource allocation within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. I was not given any message, but I'm asking a question about the mission in Geneva only because I happen to be fairly familiar with the mission. And it has to do with what appears to me to be a significant volume of work, but with a declining staff complement. And I'm just wondering, I'm seeing what appears to me to be an increase, a small increase in the allocation. I think this is subprogram 690069. But I'm wondering what is happening to be able to allow the mission and the officers there to be able to carry out their functions. I ask the question because, again, of what I see, but also because of what I see, we have taken the decision in my ministry, Ministry of Labour, to carry the labor load with some assistance, but recognizing their challenges and recognizing what Minister you said is the one Barbados approach, so that this is not labor versus foreign affairs. But I just wondered what were the plans for augmenting or strengthening the capacity of a mission that carries a significant load.
As you well know, Minister, thank you very much for your question. And you are, I know with much interest that you did say you weren't given a message to bring. But even if you were, even if you were, it would be a true message. It would be a good message to bring. Yes, in terms of personnel, some of our missions are indeed understaffed, and we remonstrate. Let me put it that way, with the authorities, with higher authorities, about the possibility of having that capacity boosted up. Unfortunately, we cannot on our own take that decision, because if we could, we would do it tomorrow. But suffice it to say, within the exigencies of the budget which the government has to operate with, and of course, the fiscal discipline is always key in these things, we will continue to press, because there are some stations at which enhanced resources are required. Geneva is one, because of the sheer amount of agencies you have to cover, subject areas, disciplines, and so forth and so on. And so anytime you fall below a certain level, you feel it. it becomes obvious. And I think that is the case. And so we will continue to work with our colleagues at the Civil Service. The ministry responsible now, I believe it is Human Resources, is now style, to ensure that we can find pathways to increase that level. In the interim, however, there's at least one and possibly two additions that we can make, that we're proposing to make very, very shortly, to assist us in several areas. And one of those areas, of course, is in the area of health. The labor portfolio, the Honourable James North, as a former ILO person himself, knows, and indeed as the former ambassador, knows that is an area that needs constant, strong representation. And so we are also going to be looking in that particular area to add. I can also tell you from my own experience that Washington, D.C. has also fallen a little bit below the complement that we require, and covering, say, for example, the OAS alone consumes a considerable amount of time, never mind Capitol Hill, all of the specific secretaryships, state, treasury, health and human services and so forth, and then of course the White House. So we need to be able to do that. Of course, in Havana, for reasons that may be a little bit more obvious than others, there's only one person there. So there's work, you're right, that we have to do to bring that complement up, because we can't achieve the objectives and the estimates if we do not have the staff complement. But what we will do, however, is that even as we remonstrate to have those positions filled, we will have, maybe unfortunately, but we will have to ask headquarters officers to do a little bit more, to carry a little bit more of the weight in accompanying their colleagues in the distant lands to ensure that our mandate is executed, because it really is difficult. And if we, again, and I go back to it, I said I'm going to be talking about it ad nauseum, if we use a Barbados country approach, I think we can negate some of those concerns, because we have a whole cadre of people working across ministries and departments in Barbados at a technical level that can assist. And it may cost a little bit in terms of the travel budget, but if we need to send somebody up to accompany the staff there to get things done and to ensure that a particular subject area or discipline is covered properly, then we will have to do that. We have to draw somebody from the Ministry of Labor. If you have to draw somebody from the Ministry of Finance, if you have to draw somebody from some other ministry, then if we have to do that, then we will have to do that in the interregnum until such time as we are able to get the backup to the staff complements that we require. Yeah?
Thank you very much. You sounded as though you were saying that you would take up some of the bill of the Ministry of Labor, because at the moment we pay our own way. No support from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But I will say, and I must say, that headquarters in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade is very, very supportive of the Ministry of Labor and our efforts. So we have no difficulty either at the level of the mission or at the level of capital where the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is concerned. I was just concerned about their occupational health, given that I'm minister responsible for that area. A related question, because this deals with resource allocation again. I was wondering, and it kind of piggybacks on the question on the diaspora, but given the limited number of bodies of people doing the work, I recall a situation when the UK imposed the air passenger duty. I remember a Prime Minister who you, Minister, worked with in a previous life, actually going to the UK, I was in tourism at the time, and engaging the diaspora in the lobbying efforts against the air passenger duty, to the point where he encouraged them, and we in tourism supported him, asking members of the diaspora to indicate to their representatives how they were going to vote with respect to support or not support or non-support for the air passenger duty. So I'm wondering if there is an appetite for using a similar strategy, that is to say, to involve the diaspora almost on a political level, not in partisan politics, but at a political level with respect to helping Barbados to achieve its objectives in the foreign affairs space.
Yes, Minister. I can answer that, but the PS is so keen on replying that I'm going to give her the opportunity to do so right now.
Thank you very much, Minister. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joyanne Skinner, and I am the Acting Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. To the Honourable Member, indeed, this is actually true. Our diaspora is very keen to represent Barbados's interest in very much the same way that those of us who are trained to do so do. And because they are not necessarily always au fait with the specific issues of interest or concern to Barbados, it is important that we inform them and keep them informed. I think communication is key in how we do so. And if we keep them engaged on the matters that are of interest to us, they are able to represent those interests to their political representatives and also to others that have an interest in Barbados. We often say that the diaspora is really Barbadians abroad as well as friends of Barbados, people who have an interest in Barbados. So it is key to what we do and how we engage our diaspora, but it isn't the only way in which the diaspora is critical. But this is an area that we recognize we have to pay even greater attention to, because the number of issues on which we have to engage our international partners continues to grow, and as the landscape becomes even more dynamic, especially with challenges, we have to find those who can well articulate our interest and do so at the level at which they're at to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me congratulate the Senior Minister on his appointment and his team as well. And let me go on to congratulate the former Minister, member for St. James Central, and also to recognize the work done by the member for St. James South in this very important ministry. My question, first question, Senior Minister, relates to Barbados's foreign policy and the whole issue of military and political conflict that has occurred in the world around, and I can call Palestine and Israel. But more importantly, we have had to be very cautious with our responses. And my question relates to how should we, as a small country, balance neutrality and moral responsibility when responding to power conflicts in the world? That's my first question.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. You know, in many ways, it's a difficult question, but it's also relatively easy. I'll tell you why it is difficult first, and that is obvious. It is difficult because of the level of uncertainty that exists in how and where and with what we have to operate. When traditional partners diverge from, and I'm using my language as diplomatically as I can, when traditional partners, yes, diverge from what we would consider to be customary norms of engagement, for whatever reason, and maybe certainly in their view, for legitimate reasons, it's part of national interest, national policy, whatever the case may be, and they are large enough to cause seismic shifts in the way countries relate to each other and to them, then you have to, as a small, vulnerable country, you have to sit up and take stock. You can't pretend that these things don't exist. Yeah? We don't set the course for other countries. Other countries, foreign policy and national policy is the sovereign right of every country. All we can do as a member of the collection of nations in the world is to ensure that our core principles, this is where it gets a little easier for us, that you set core, fundamental, and philosophical principles by which you stand as a country. There's a usual cliche saying, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. We have to ensure that the world knows what Barbados stands for. And, people have gotten maybe tired of hearing the friends of all, satellites of none mantra. In fact, I heard somebody say in the calling programs today that it is the biggest set of nonsense they've ever heard. Now, if ever there was a reason to recommend you not to listen to calling programs, that might be one of them. But I go on to say that the reason why we have these things as first principles is because we want to engage the world as a maturing democracy that understands that every country in the world, big, small, or in between, has a place. And that the way we engage with other countries is based on what our philosophical view of the world is. That all countries should be able to participate in the patrimony of the world. That we ought to draw on the resources shared as they are between all countries of the world. That even as there is geographic and economic and even political asymmetry among countries, that is, that we are not all the same, we don't have the same resources, we don't have the same powers, and so forth and so on. Even as there is asymmetry among countries, there is an equalizing factor that exists among states. That is our sovereign right to determine who we are, what we are, and how we will be. And that is the grand norm. That is the lawyers will tell you about the grand norm. That is the grand of what our foreign policy is based on. That we are not here to pick fights, even though we may become entangled in them as collateral damage. Because they say, it's an old saying that when the elephants fight, the only people who suffer is the grass. Well, in the context of global geopolitics, we may be the grass. But at the same time, we know that good savanna grass, even when it is crushed, it still rises. And so we have to position ourselves, not to take up fire rage, as we were saying, Barbados for A or B. That's not what we are about. We are about a rules-based order, because as a small country, and I think Prime Minister said it well on the campaign trail, if you send your child to nursery, to primary school in infants, you don't expect the class 4 child to come and beat at your child and take away the lunch or whatever little coppers you may give them to buy a sweetie or two. But if you don't set rules in the school, that is precisely what will happen. So when we say rules-based order, we are saying that countries collectively, either in their regional dispensations or in their multilateral dispensations, in their global dispensations, ought to set rules by which we are going to operate. Otherwise, the mighty will crush the weak. And that is the fundamental basis of them moving forward. And why do we say this? Because as a country that has come through the experience of slavery and colonialism, we know what it is to be subjugated. And we're not going back there. So we have to find like-minded countries. And that is what this whole thing is about. This is what the foreign policy is about. Finding like-minded countries to work with, to build alliances, to push back against the mighty. We are not picking fights, but we are defending our honor. And in the space, we will do so by strategic partnerships. Why is working with everybody? So we are friends of all, hail fellows, well met, but satellites of none. We will not trumpet this ism, that ism, this doctrine, that doctrine. That's not our disposition. Our thing is to ensure that we protect the interests of our people, protect the interests of our region, and in fact undergird what is a Caribbean civilization in the context of the world. That is what we are about. And if we are not doing that, sir, I tell you, we might as well shut the shop and go home. And right now the shop is not shut. All the doors are open for business. That is where Barbados is, and that is where we are going to go.
Thank you, Minister. The two phrases, the two words I should say, neutrality and moral responsibility, you seem to have focused heavily on moral responsibility. I don't have a difficulty with that, but well articulated, sir. My next question relates to trade and sanctions. We've been able as a small island developing state to navigate trade relationships with countries.
Honourable member, is this a new question or a
No,
follow-up question?
it is related, sir. It is related. It is related.
Proceed.
Thank you, sir. We've been able to navigate certain trade relationships with countries that have been under sanctions. Sanctions have been imposed on these countries, but we've been able in the past to navigate still because of our sovereign focus. But I am seeing a shift, and we use the phrase geopolitical challenges in the world. Do you foresee, and let me add, not just the geopolitical challenges in the world, but what is coming to the region as a serious powerhouse? Do we foresee any challenges in terms of trade relationships in this new dispensation? Like I said, what is coming to the region as a powerhouse? Do we foresee any challenges with countries that sanctions have been imposed upon, will be imposed upon? Do we foresee any challenges in terms of maintaining our sovereign base in forming trade relationships with these countries? And I can hit the nail, just call one Cuba. You know, let's talk, Senior Minister.
I kind of know that, I kind of sense that that's the direction that you were going in. Look, you know what we've had principled positions on this for years. Look, we can't hide it under a bushel. It's been there. We voted in United Nations, our vote is open, our voice has been open in relation to what we do with Cuba and why, yeah? And that vote to ask the United Nations family to call for the lifting of those sanctions, that blockade as they call it, has gone on for many years. And we can't say that we're not proud of what we have done. We did it for cause and for good reason. Truth is, because of the blockade, we've not done a whole lot of trade with Cuba because it's simply very difficult to do. You know, but in a funny way, and we don't know what may happen, right? Because things are very fluid, and CARICOM heads have discussed this issue and they raised it with Secretary Rubio when we had a special meeting with him last week. There's a potential that changes are going to happen. And those changes We don't know what they are, and we can't presage to say what they are. What we can do, however, is to ensure that we continue to monitor the situation, maintain our position in relation to sanctions and other issues which have been affecting Cuban state, express our solidarity with them, ensure that we work to ensure that we work to ensure that no disaffected humanitarian crisis exists in the country for whatever reason, to contribute as nations in the CARICOM region to ensuring that we support ordinary citizens in Cuba to be able to survive and prepare ourselves to work for a solution that would be to the benefit of the people of Cuba. That's where we have to be in this space. This is not, a game of chance. It is not a game. It's a very serious thing. And you raised a very serious question. And we are treating it not just as individual countries, but we're treating it as a region, because we have all had relations with Cuba. And many of them have been very beneficial. We know during COVID what happened. We know that. And therefore we're not going to turn our backs on our friends. We're not going to pretend that we don't have those relationships, but we are going to work with all sides to ensure that whatever happens, the people of Cuba are come out the better for this in the end. That is as much as I can say in the circumstances. I know you pose it as a trade question, but truthfully it goes beyond just trade. It is a deeper question, and it is happening right in our neighborhood. And we can, we will do the stuff that we need to do, but we need to have an open, very clear-eyed understanding of, the directions in which this can go. These goodly folk you see behind here from the CARICOM desk and so forth, they're working every day with our staff in Cuba to ensure, one, that they're safe, of course, and taken care of, but two, that we have the kind of intelligence for which Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Prime Minister's office, and others can be able to make decisions based on real-time intelligence about what is happening in this hemisphere where Cuba is concerned. Because there's a saying which we use, today for me and tomorrow for you. So I will leave it there. I think I should exercise what little diplomatic skills I have and leave it right there. But just to say, I thank you for that question. It was very pointed, but it gave me an opportunity to say something that otherwise might not have been said. Thank you.
Thank you, Senior Minister and team. I'll pause for now. Come back tomorrow.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
Beg to second that.
The question is that I do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Reported progress and request leave to sit again. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 20 to 6.
The question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 20 minutes to 6. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 20 minutes to 6.